Good evening. It's June 10th, 2024. We're holding right now one day before Shavuos. Tonight was a very exciting night for this podcast, probably the most exciting night. We had an opportunity to interview someone very special. Usually, I can speak about, very special people, Talmidei Chachamim, other people deserving of honor. But it's a rarity that we actually get to speak to one of their children, to have a child who designated time to speak on this podcast is something very, very precious. People are very, very busy, and it's not easy to do that. There's continuous stories that keep on coming out. I hope everybody enjoys, and I thank Esther very much for designating time to talk. Thank you. Have a good Yontif. So
do you do this a lot, or is this like your first interview?
This is my first interview. I've never done it before.
Wow, this is like the big leagues of podcasting, right? The interview.
Right. It makes it really popular, but
That's
usually.
right. And I'm like a super famous person. You might not know that, but this will get you a lot of traffic. Oh yeah, big time. And I never go on podcasts, so this is a big deal.
That's really cool. Well, if this is your first podcast as well, we're going to have a nice introduction with our horn. And then we have the next question is going to be 1 minute, and then you can take it away. Your father was really one of the greatest mechanchim in St. Louis. He had really a very, very big name. Just, I guess you got it from your father. Just his name was in Chinuch. I don't know where you got your name from, but he was known as a really big Talmid Chacham. I've only heard positive things spoken about him amongst everyone. He also was a little bit famous for some of his jokes and some of his pranks. And I keep hearing new stories about him. And what's interesting is that there's so many good things, but I don't get to hear much about him in family life, other than I know his children. He raised the family where he was matzliach at transmitting the Masorah, but more than that, just the family is full of Talmidei Chachamim or son-in-laws of Talmidei Chachamim. And I was thinking that perhaps that's because of the way he was at home. And maybe that's not so common, because there's a Gemara that asks, why don't Talmidei Chachamim, why are they not zocheh to have Talmidei Chachamim as children? And you'll notice a lot of mechanchim make a lot of time for their students and in the community, but maybe they don't make so much time for their children at home. So I wanted to know, what was he like as a father? And if there's anything else you want to share, that would be great. So your name, of course, is Esther, and you're the third child, I think, right?
Yep.
There was Shlomo, Shaya.
Not me.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's a big question. Yeah, I guess it's funny. It took me, I think it took me a very long time, I think, to even be able to talk about him, because there was such a legend, I think, surrounding him as a Rebbe, him as a character in the community. And that wasn't really at all how I experienced him. I experienced him as like a very dedicated father. And, being a hands-on parent is it's not like the story of legends, right? It's just an experience that you as a child have every day, right? Your parents, every morning I wake up, he'd sing Moda Ani every single morning to us. I remember when I was little. Um, and I remember when I was older, and sometimes I'd wake up early and come out, and he'd be like sitting there drinking his coffee, learning. He was always an early riser, like a big smile and so excited to see me. And, um, my siblings have very similar memories of just early in the morning, very present, late at night, so interested in talking to us, hearing about our day, um, funny stories about it. He was very into doing things with us. So we did a lot of bike riding. We'd have a few years where every day we rode the 8 Mile track in Forest Park every single day. We'd go swimming at night in the summer. He was very into swimming. He had grown up in Miami, and he thought it was, from a safety perspective, very important that we swam a lot. And also, it was just like a lot of fun. So he had some friends who had pools, and he would take us swimming in the summer almost every day. Um, so just like a lot of day-to-day activities and special activities, and like just very present. That's a lot of what I remember is like just very present with us, in everyday moments. From the time I was little, there was a lot of intertwining of Torah. So I remember driving. There was like a year or two when we drove to Epstein, and in the mornings there would be a recording of some Mishnah. Like my brothers were memorizing Mishnayos. He actually wanted me to also try to memorize, but I never agreed. But my brothers were pretty good about it. So, but like it was sort of like everything was sort of mixed up with a lot of Torah, a lot of fun, a lot, and just everyday moments they were like events with him,
Wow.
and sort of constant.
So what I heard you say is that he used to take you bike riding, and you guys used to go swimming in the summertime at night.
Just because he grew up in Miami, he was really into swimming. He thought it was.
Got it. And the Mishnah, so he asked you to memorize, he wanted you to memorize Mishnah, so he encouraged you to memorize Mishnah. Did it depend which Masechta it was, or it didn't really matter which Masechta?
It was more what was playing in the car. It'd be playing on the radio. Like instead of the radio, it was like a tape of some Mishnah, and like it was like everyone in the car should just try to memorize it together. And we do that for about halfway to school, and then the rest of the way we could have music or whatever.
So it wasn't
Um,
specifically like Pirkei Avos necessarily.
no, not anything. Whatever Shlomo. I mean, it was all the kids in the car. So whatever Shlomo, Shaya, probably Zalman. I think these were the earlier days. I think like all parents, there was probably more intense focus on, structured things when we were younger. And then I think as we got older, it was, a little bit softer. I don't think the memorizing Mishnayos in the car in the morning lasted to the younger group per se. But different kufot, different things. So that was definitely one of them.
So he was a fun-loving dad, just more than just a regular dad. He was really present, despite the fact that there's plenty to do, there's plenty for him to do, but he really paid attention to his children on top of everything else that he did for the community and his students. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. I would say his kids, me and my siblings, I think very much felt his, like he loved to spend time with us, and he couldn't wait to do things with us. He was very interested in what was happening in our lives. Um, he'd always connect it with himself. How if we did something, it was very similar to something he experienced. There's a lot of, at all times, like this sort of constant connection, that I didn't realize. When I was little, I just thought it meant that we were so much alike. But as I got older, I realized it was very much a way to create a sense of connection as a child. That I probably wasn't that similar to him as a 5-year-old. I probably was just a 5-year-old, but he'd be like, "Oh, I know exactly what that's like. I went through the same thing." That he made everything feel very much like a deep connection, which is I think how other people experience him as well. But I think in a way
That's
more so.
That's really cool. So I noticed that, so I made this whole thing on, I was speaking about your father really on, it's basically a podcast. And I thought like I'm way out of place. I'm like 23 years ahead of time. Like I was thinking like, why am I doing this 23 years later? I really wasn't thinking that at all. But I thought maybe others would be thinking that. But then a friend of mine today screenshot something from your Facebook page, which was put on just last year, and it sounded like that was the first time in many many years that you've posted something on it. But maybe I'm completely off on that. Could that be true?
Probably. I mean, I'm not much of a social media person um, to begin with, and whatnot. But also, I think it's hard to do justice to. I think the stories that you share and what you talk about are so important and so worthwhile to share. But like as a child, I think, what I remember is so much of like day to day happiness, day to day connection, day to day laughter. And that's that's hard to that's hard, especially when I was younger. I think it was hard to communicate because it wasn't some amazing story. And I think as I got older, I realized how much people really appreciate that. But um, and that's to me what I think I'm closest to and what I appreciate the most was how consistently, loving, caring, happy, um, inspired he was, like at all times, in a really like easy way to be around. Like he was just a parent that you felt he really wanted us to feel very comfortable with him, very comfortable with ourselves. We're all kind of different, if you know the Pollack kids. We're we're all quirky and we're not exactly alike. And I think he really imbued us with the sense that that's actually a really good thing and to be encouraged. And um,
Yeah.
it's hard to communicate, but especially when I was younger, I think I didn't know how to translate that into some big story.
Do you remember? I've been hearing recently of I had a cousin who was many years older than me, and older than Shlomo, which is your oldest sibling. And he said he used to go over to your house every Shabbos afternoon to play ping pong. And there were all these games in the basement. And I have a vague memory of that. But then someone else was also telling me that. And he was telling me, it was Jake Weintraub. He was telling me that he felt really close to Rabbi Pollack. And it was really striking to me that he went over there and there wasn't anybody his age. So he really went there, I think, really for Rabbi Pollack because there was someone who had a ping pong table who lived right across the street from him. So it's just interesting that Rabbi Pollack did things, that your father did things to attract people to his house. To um, perhaps that was one of the ways that he he chose to spread Avos Torah. Perhaps, do you think that
Yeah,
could be?
yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, there was until we finished our basement, uh, which I don't remember exactly when that was, but you might even remember more than me because then Shlomo's bedroom was downstairs. But there was definitely a period when I was young where every Shabbos a ton of boys came over and we had all these board games down there, and my parents bought this junk food, and the house was happening with tons and tons of boys playing games all Shabbos. Um, I
So,
definitely
what was
remember
that
that.
like for you?
I think I was little. I don't remember a lot of it. I remember Shabbos as being very busy in my house, being a real party. Lots of people, lots of fun. My parents were very into welcoming anybody, and I remember that. I think my memories are probably a little bit later, so it wasn't tons and tons of students every Shabbos. I think that was when I was really young. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember when I was older, lots of people being very welcome and from all walks of life, and just being, at our house, some of them students, some of them former students, some of them people that, my father or mother had met, anywhere. My parents were Chabad, and they took very seriously inviting people for Shabbos, making sure people always have a place on Shabbos. So depending on the year and the crowd, it was different demographics, but I just remember it was always happening. And my father was into things feeling fun and happy. There was a real enjoyment in our house. It was not, it was, it made sense that people would feel so comfortable, no matter who they were and where they came from coming, because the ambiance was very funny. My father was able to relate to anyone with a good story. And there was also just everyone was just welcome. There was no sense that anyone would be judged for any reason. So I remember that. I remember, depending on the year, depending on who was around, it was different groups. The students were young. I was very young for that, but I just have some recollections of like a lot of candy, the ping pong table. There's the Beis Hamikdash skier. I don't know if you heard about that. That was, I
No.
barely remember that. I don't know. It probably was like Jake's time. I'm not sure. It was like definitely like these groups much older than me, where they built a Beis Hamikdash model in our basement every Motzei Shabbos for like 6 months. They'd all come
Wow.
by, and I don't know what they did with it, but it was huge. And they were building it like a lot. That was another period I remember of like a lot of people over at all times doing things. So yeah, very busy. Depending on the year, there was always something going on.
One of the things that amazed me, there's the many things that amazed me. One of the things that amazed me when I used to come over to your house when I was a kid, or third, fifth grade, was how comfortable you felt in your house with all of these guys. So your father did things to make everyone feel comfortable, but including his own children, which is great. It's not always like that. Probably also part of your personality, I would think. I remember going over to your father's house. He would have all of us over. Some of the people were from, some of the people were not from. Most of us were from. But I think he did it really for the few kids that were not from. And he would make Shabbos really as enjoyable as possible. And not just that, but he worked at it. He did actual work, not just pull out a bencher and sing Zmiros, but to me, it looked like he maybe even added on to songs that were already made, like Big Gedalia Gumber. On Uncle Moishi, you listen to the song, it's maybe a minute or two long. And then going to your father's house, just pages and pages of like all these cases. And I wasn't sure like where he got all these cases from. It was just amazing how much effort he put forth trying to make Yiddishkeit fun, enjoyable, exactly what you said. And there's a story that comes to mind, speaking of making people happy in the house. There is a little bit of a victim in this story, though. And I don't know all the details, but something about putting an actual live chicken maybe in the refrigerator. Does that ring a bell? Or
No,
oh.
but it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
There was some story where there was a chicken head, no, maybe a chicken head in the refrigerator that just people started like freaking out or something like that. But I'm probably off on my details. So especially
I
if
don't
you've
know.
never heard.
Yeah, I don't remember this one, but it could have been. Also, I think it's important to just, highlight my mom too in all of this, that she, you know, my father was hosting all the students, but my mom was, she was preparing all the food and involved in setting up. And of course, when the students came by, dealing with the mess afterwards. So it's definitely both of my parents together doing it. My father was able to do all these things, absolutely, because of the support that my mother gave to it. So I want to definitely highlight her as well, in all of these contributions, and the happy home we had. But yep, I don't remember a chicken story. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's very possible. I do remember the songbooks though. It's funny, there was another song in there. I don't know if you remember, there was one about the altar Rebbe on Yom Kippur making a fire for like a woman who had just given birth. Do you remember this song? I don't know.
I don't remember the song, but if you have this, I would love to get.
I think there may be a copy somewhere, but I remember because I used to, I mean, I was at these lunches. They happened when there was a siyum, so I think 2 or 3 times a year, right? For years, from the time I was really, really little. I couldn't wait to be in third grade for it to be my class. And it went on until, you know, the whole time my father taught. So I was already in high school. And some of it, it was amazing. He picked these songs that were just, you know, very deliberate. They were very deliberate. So it showcased, you know, Shabbos and be funny and also inspire, and English lyrics so that people could really relate to them. Some of them were Hebrew, but a lot of both. And it sort of was it's the way he taught, right? He was very deliberate in every single choice, making sure that things were really thought through and, you know, created a message and an ambience. But I'll look and see. Someone probably has that book still.
Right. You know, most people, like, I envision when they come to St. Louis, actually, just a few months ago, I went onto the Epstein Hebrew Academy website to see if there's any like open positions for a Rebbe, just to see maybe I would be a good position over there. And I saw they were looking for a fifth grade Rebbe. And, you know, I would love to try out and everything, but my family won't even think about moving to St. Louis. But then I thought, like, what does a fifth grade Rebbe entail? And I'm like, okay, you just go in and you give a little shir, you prepare something, and then you leave. And I don't know. And then I thought of thought of your father, and I was like, wait a minute, no, that's not what it entails. It entail well. I don't know what it entails, but your father did. It didn't just come in to teach, and so let's say he got paid for whatever he taught there, but he did everything he possibly can. He used all of his creativity to transmit a love for Yiddishkeit, even to the extent where he was trying to figure out how can he get the students of the class into a beis medrash where they will see people get excited about learning. So basically, if Lakewood was in St. Louis, that would be his dream, or maybe 770. I've never been to 770. It's probably like that as well. But we had the Aguda, but the Aguda wasn't going to work out. So there was just it happened to have been my father who learns at Young Israel a couple of times a week, and my father kind of gets excited about learning. It's just one charusa. Your father wanted all of us. He said he would like all of us to witness it. So he started giving a share. Plus, he wanted us to, he was encouraging us for extra learning. We didn't have to come, but it was just amazing how dedicated he was. And now that you're telling me like that he was also dedicated to the family, that's really, that's a true rarity. So I don't know how someone has time to do all that and has all the energy to do all that. It's just
Right.
totally
Yeah,
amazing.
looking back, it's pretty amazing. And he dedicated a lot to teaching, and he dedicated a lot to being a parent, like at all times. And I think he, you know, to him it was really important, and he had this energy to life and this sense of purpose. I think that most people don't have. I think he felt really good about everything he did, and I don't think most people have that, where they do things and not like in an arrogant way or in an annoying way, but just in like this calm, happy way where they feel really, you know, content with their accomplishments and with their activities throughout the day. And he had that, and I think people sense at them. He was a very calm person. And like as I get older, I realize like I'm not calm usually when I'm stressed about something or I'm happy about something. But like with him, I think he did things very deliberately. They took a lot of time, they took a lot of energy, and it was important for him. And uh, it was very consistent. Like he was a very consistent parent. I think he was a very consistent teacher. It just, and his reward was the fact that he felt good about it. He felt like it was right, and he was very content being that person.
Now, I had some people I played tennis with who were, both of them were from Chesterfield, very good tennis players. And they were telling me once that they said their father, both of them, their fathers go to a shir with Rabbi Pollack. And I asked them, I said, what, they come to you city? No, they said Rabbi Pollack goes all the way out to Chesterfield, which is a 20, for some reason back then, I feel like it took 30 minutes. Like on those Gan Izzy school buses took 30 minutes. I don't
Definitely.
um, so he would go out there. There's no way Epstein had anything to do with that. And he taught them. And what was interesting is I remember being at one of their homes, and okay, the Shmir Shabbos was whatever level it was on, but we were benching, and I don't know for sure if I was there, but I have the memory. So either someone told me or not. But then Yala V'Yavo, either someone didn't know whether they said it or not, and they knew the halachas. The people who went to his shir, they were not necessarily from, but when it came to like, they knew those halachas and they kept them. Like, do we go back and bench again? Do we not? And I thought that was something really precious. And that's in that avoda is the fact that he would be accepting of that. That's, I think that's also precious. There's this kind of like a joke, like when someone's becoming from Rabbi Kiva Tatz, I think he once said there was a family and they said, well, where are you holding right now? And they said, well, right now we're holding by Chalav Yisrael. What should we do next? And the question was like, are you holding by what about Kashrus, what about Shabbos? And they weren't really holding anywhere there. But the impression, I don't know how your father would have responded to such a case, but the impression that I had is that any type of avodas Hashem, anything, wherever the person's holding, that's where they're holding. And this is this is something simple. Let's say, okay, maybe Shabbos is the basic, is a main thing, but in kashrus, if they're holding by wherever they're holding, Yalav or whatever it is, that's meaningful to him, and he continued giving his share. It's
Yeah,
once a month,
I
I think it
remember the
was.
Chesterfield. I remember the Chesterfield Kufa as well. That was there was a number of years where we would go once a month for Shabbos to Chesterfield because they didn't have anyone really doing, I think, youth groups over there, Shabbos shiurim. There's my father did a lot of Shabbos shiurim for the boys, and then at some point the Chesterfield kids complained that they didn't have any. They didn't have that on in Chesterfield, and that wasn't here. So we went once a month for Shabbos. I would do the little kid groups for the Shabbos. Um, and yeah, and it was again the principle that the more the better. If anyone, if he was able to do something to help out, it was important to him to be able to do it. And all his students mattered, and Chesterfield. Why shouldn't they have the same things that the U City kids have, at least to some extent? So that was the attitude. I remember also like walking to base aid for like random bar mitzvahs or New Sachari. We did a lot of New Sachari at some point as well. And these places were far, right? I remember New Sachari being miles and miles away, but probably it wasn't. But, the same principle. It was always about that if he could bring something to some of the kids there or some of the families there, he really wanted to. And he did it with a lot of energy and I think felt really good about it. And, loved to be part of that.
Wow, I didn't realize that you went to Chesterfield for Shabbos. That's wow. And Bay Say, by the way, that really was miles and miles away.
That wasn't so often. I feel like the Pickers had bar mitzvahs there. It was pretty random, but I do remember going for things, and very much that principle that
Yeah.
it's important to be there for people when you can.
Now, speaking of the Pickers, someone just told me today that so his father was a brain surgeon. Dr. Picker brought a human brain into the shir once. I don't know if
I
it was
remember that at my house.
at your house.
I think
So
there was a Kohen there who had to leave, if I remember the story right.
so was it like to demonstrate something in the Gemara, or was it like do you like was it do you remember why, or just he wanted, maybe he wanted to just make that connection to maybe Rabbi Pollack was this is what he does for Parnasso, and Rabbi Pollack maybe was trying to make that connection and make it feel precious. I don't know.
My father was a very curious person. I can't imagine he wouldn't want to see a human brain, no matter what this. It could be it was connected to the Gemara somehow, but even if it wasn't, I think my father was always very interested in people, what they did, anything. I think he was always excited to see anything different, new. So I don't remember the story. Probably my mom does. Probably she wasn't thrilled.
Um,
But I don't remember the story, but I'm sure, whatever the reason, I think it would have been exciting for him to have a brain in the house.
and today, someone told me the story of how he used to clean the ceilings in the shuls in Miami to save up money to buy a pair of tefillin. Have you ever heard that story before?
It sounds familiar. Sounds familiar. I know he had to work hard for what his Yiddishkeit. It was on every level, very hard for him, and he really did. Financially, family wise, he was he at 16, um, and it was not easy for him. I think so. He worked really hard. He put in a lot of effort, and um, was very. Not everything came easy for him, and he was always very open about that. Very proud, I think, but also very open that it wasn't easy, and that's okay. Like not everything is easy. I remember when I was in school and I'd have a hard time and things, and he would tell me like, I remember, he was brilliant. My father, right? Everyone, he had his memory, and he was a brilliant person. He knew so much, but he also had academic challenges, and he was very open about that. Definitely going to yeshiva was very hard for him at the beginning, and he worked really hard. Um, and he was very open with everyone about that, which I think is, again, nowadays it's so common, but it wasn't so common back in the day. And he was always very open about, reading challenges he had and whatnot. So I'm
Do you
also
remember someone, yeah, continue.
sorry. No, you go ahead.
Do you remember someone on your block named Clayton?
Yes, yes, very much.
So I was just impressed. I'm even more impressed now looking back at it, but just how, like, when talking to Shlomo, even we were at Gan Izzy together, which was the Lubavitch camp, which kind of at that time was the St. Louis camp, and he spoke about Clayton like I don't know, as if he was almost like a family member, and I realized that Clayton came from a different culture, different everything, and it just showed how accepting the family was towards him. And I know it's more common in St. Louis to be that accepting, so I started to appreciate this more after I left St. Louis. But I thought that was something really precious. And the other thing is that there was it Channel 5 News that lived on your block?
Yes, that was Clayton's father,
That was Clayton's father. Okay.
hmm who also passed
That
away in that awful fire.
right. They both tragically passed away.
Yeah,
And
but very close. We grew up, they were right across the street from us. And my father had a very deep sense of connecting with all people. Like, I think it's just how he was wired. Um, when he was in the hospital, at some point, for the last 3 weeks of his life, he was in a coma. And I remember the woman who would mop the hospital floor, she came in and she would say, like, how's my friend? He's such a good friend to me. He always asks me how I'm doing. We talk about my kids. Um, and that's just what he was like. No matter who he met, he really connected with. And the Rices lived across the street from us. Mr. Rice was a very funny person, as was my father. And, you know, it was a really beautiful relationship. He would tell, he called himself the Shabbos Goy. He knew all the halachos. I remember one year we lit the menorah, and Mr. Rice pulled out some crazy light he had in his garage, like a stadium light, and shone it into our window as we were lighting. And we looked out the window, and he's like, "You think you have a light? This is a light." Like, it was just so funny. Um, and it was a really, you know, beautiful friendship, and very much aligned with the values of my father, which were that every person is interesting, every person is worth getting to know, and any person could be your friend. He really, that's how he acted, and people gravitated to it.
It's just amazing. And I mean, that relationship must have been really close, because he even got Channel 5 meteorologist Bob Richards to come to Epstein to do a whole weather forecast. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but he did a lot of shtick with. One time he took him to Rabbi Leitag's house. Poor Rabbi Leitag is getting so much airtime on this. Hi, Rabbi Leitag, if you're listening. But I think he brought him to his house once to pretend like they were doing a surprise news story on like how the Jews celebrate Rosh Hashanah or something. It was all made
Oh,
up. It was like a stage trick, but he got the whole Channel 5 newscast to go to his house to pretend like they were putting him on the news on the spot. So, like, yeah, they had a good time together. And it was
well, my
pretty
mom
neat.
had the video of Bob Richards in the gymnasium of Epstein, so I know that he was there. Uh, there's so much more to say. I see that. Oh man, I could spend another hour, but I do have
Okay,
to get
we'll
going.
probably have enough material.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, well,
All right.
have a good Yontif.
Yeah. Thank you very much for. It's been a schus having you, and
Thank you.
have a very good yontif. Yeah. I was listening to this interview again, and I wanted to leave off with a couple of reflections. Just when I heard Esther speaking, when I listened to it a second time, I just want to say the following. Over the past few years, I've been working as a chaplain in various hospitals and hospice, and was part of a CPE program, clinical pastoral education. But one of the topics that's discussed, a major topic, is grief. In fact, one of our assignments is to write every single loss that we've ever had in our life, and that's called the grief assignment. And then write if we've ever had someone there with us. Was there someone there with us to talk to about? And that's not just referring to the loss of a loved one. That's really referring to even very minor losses. Very minor losses. And basically the thinking is that if you did not have someone there with you who was empathetic, compassionate empathy, and was able to reflect that back, so then you could try journaling. But these types of things is what brings healing to the grief and healing to the loss. And if that didn't exist, or the journaling didn't work for whatever reason, so there's a certain type of healing that could still one could still benefit from. So in this assignment, we just would write, I guess it was kind of like journaling and then sharing it with someone. But, you know, when you listen to her words, and maybe this isn't her situation, it sounds like it was a situation where it was very hard to grieve, because as she pointed out, her father, there was a lot of legendary stories. But as a child, that's really not what the child is grieving. So on one hand, yeah, there's tons of people probably being Menachem Avel. You know, I was in Eretz Yisrael at the time, but I'm sure there were tons of people being Menachem Avel. It didn't occur around a Yontif, or in Nisan or Tishrei. So one might think that, yeah, there was a lot of people there, so plenty of people, very helpful to grieve. But the only thing that I wonder, and if this interview was to continue, I don't know if I would ask it or not, but one of the things that I wonder is for the children, was that even helpful? Was that, were people even on the same wavelength? Because as you heard, the child didn't see. Child sees her father very different, and someone that would smile every morning and would really cared about them and was really present for them. And was that what people were grieving? And in the community, of course, that's not what people were grieving. In the community, the loss was expressed in another way. And in a certain way, I think really my podcast also didn't focus on that at all until I interviewed her. And even then, it's only like now that I'm really reflecting on that. So it's just something to think about. I don't know what to make of it, but because of that, just the bracha, it just validates the need for a bracha for nechama, for the whole family. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring a nechama to them and what's going on in the world today. We have there's a lot of suffering in the world, so may we all have a nechama, and ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu be with us, and may we see Mashiach b'mheira b'yameinu.